Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS. In this video, we are going to understand and look into the 5 most important topics from the environment section that has happened in the past week. So let us start. So the first news is with respect to the human wildlife conflict. Okay, so this is from which chapter? This is from the chapter of biodiversity and its conservation. Okay, so biodiversity and conservation. Okay, so oftentimes you will find when we talk about human wildlife conflict, we will see that at times what will happen is that the wildlife or the animals like tigers or animals like elephants, they will go into these zones where there is huge amount of human population or human settlements are there. And in this case, what will happen is that there will be a conflict. Okay, that means human wildlife conflict. That means humans conflicting with animals or vice versa. Okay, because these animals, because there would be some sort of habitat degradation, you will find that these animals, they move out of the forest and into the zones where there is considerable amount of human settlement. And when this happens, you will find that there is some sort of conflict. Okay, so the idea behind conservation, when we talk about biodiversity and conservation, is moving from human wildlife conflict to actually moving towards human wildlife coexistence, right? So let us discuss about this issue. You can see on the right side an elephant that has died due to the collision by train. Okay, these are the kind of accidents that usually happen, and they are leading to mass deaths of a lot of number of elephants. Okay, so first, why it is in news? First, rising human wildlife conflict in India, it is linked to first habitat fragmentation. What does habitat fragmentation means? So when we talk about the habitat, suppose this is a habitat of an animal. Okay, and suppose you need, from the infrastructural point of view, you need to construct a certain railway line, okay, that crosses across this habitat. Okay, so this is habitat fragmentation because it is dividing this into two parts, part 1 and part 2. Okay, this is habitat fragmentation. Slowly you will find that the animals that are there in the part 2 will try to cross over to part 1. Part 1 animals will try to cross over to part 2. Okay, in this case, there will be instances of accidents. Okay, and therefore there will be human wildlife conflict here as well. So first is this. Second is land use change. Land use change particularly points towards the changing patterns in which the land is being used. That means when we talk about forests, so forests are being cleared off. That means deforestation is happening, and now it has been replaced by agriculture. That means growing of crops. Now you will find that these land use change is also leading to their habitat being fragmented as well as habitat being degraded. Okay, so they have no other option but to move out to these agricultural fields. Third is ecological imbalance. Okay, that means habitat degradation as well as habitat fragmentation will lead to lesser amount of the food or whatever the activities ecological niche would provide them, and therefore ecological imbalance will force them to move out of their regular habitats. Okay, so this human wildlife conflict is being driven by habitat fragmentation, land use, and ecological imbalance. The core insight here is that it is not merely a conservation issue, it is a socio-ecological governance challenge. Ecological governance challenge. So when we are talking about whether the people are also involved, yes, in human wildlife, people are also involved. It is their livelihood, income, as well as their lives and their properties that are at stake due to the wildlife. Okay. With respect to ecology, we can talk about the animals' lives which are at stake and their habitat that has been fragmented and degraded. Okay, so it is about having this governance challenge with respect to the social welfare also and with respect to the environmental conservation and its components. Okay. So here again you can see how the elephant has come into the cropland. Okay, that means agricultural fields. You will see that they will come into the zones of human settlements. So negative, what is human wildlife conflict? Let us answer this first. What is it? It is a negative interaction between whom? Humans and wildlife. Okay, we are not talking about the positive interaction. Positive interaction would mean human wildlife coexistence. This is a negative interaction. That means it is a zero-sum game in which one will kill the another. Okay, so it is causing human deaths. Yes, on the human side, it is causing human deaths. Crop loss because of economic loss will also be there, because they come and they destroy, they raid the crops, they destroy the crops, or they also eat them. Okay, in this kind of a case, the whole year's hard work of farmers can get destroyed. Okay. Third, livestock predation. Okay, in cases of tigers which are raiding such kind of areas, you will find that they will also carry the livestock or the farmers, and that is also going to affect the livelihood income of the farmers. Fourth, retaliatory killings of animals. The thing is that when they come to these zones, now this elephant has come here only because of the reason the forests or the habitat has degraded to such an extent that it was forced to move out. And once it moved out, it found those crops. Now these crops are something that is going to be, making the elephant much more habituated to the taste of the crops, as well as the huge amount or dense calorie content that is contained in these crops. Okay, so therefore you will find that this becomes a behavioral change in the elephants itself. This points to the increasing elephant conflict with the humans. So you will see that the humans will retaliate. Humans will retaliate by what? They will retaliate by killing the animal. Major drivers, yes, habitat loss and fragmentation. Then when we talk about linear infrastructure is the one that cuts the habitat into two parts, like this. Okay, it will cut it into two parts. Similarly, if there is a linear infrastructure like this, it will again cut the habitat into two parts. So we are talking about what kind of infrastructure, whether it is roads, railways, or canals. These are the ones that are utilized for connectivity, better connectivity from point A to point B. However, this point A to point B goes through a forest, and therefore habitat fragmentation, that means fragmenting the forest into two parts, it takes place. Okay. Third, it is pointing towards the land use change, that means urbanization and agricultural expansion, right? Fourth is climate change impacts. A huge number of climate change impacts. The effects of climate change is being felt everywhere. You'll find that it is also going to leading to the drying up of water holes. The water holes are specifically for the animals that are situated within the forest, and they serve the thirsty needs for the animals. Okay, if these water holes are dried up, then the animals do not have any option but to move out into the human settlements. All right. So important concept here is wildlife corridors disrupted by infrastructure increase the encounters. Now wildlife corridors, what are wildlife corridors? So suppose this is the habitat 1, this is habitat 2. Okay, so this is one habitat, or this is a kind of an ecological niche where the elephants survive, and this is again another kind of habitat. Now this connectivity between the habitats is what we call as the wildlife corridor. Okay, that means the elephant, if it is devoid, if this habitat has degraded, it still has the option through going through this wildlife corridor into the next habitat and satisfying its hunger needs and its ecological activities, right? But wildlife corridors, they are disrupted by infrastructure. Okay, so these get disrupted by infrastructure like this. Okay, so this kind of dissociates the two habitats, habitat 1 and habitat 2. So the elephants who are there in habitat 1, if the habitat gets degraded, they cannot move to habitat 2 because a railway line passes through in between them. Okay. Now, what are the costs? Okay, what are the costs? As a simple example, human cost is there. That means human deaths have occurred, and significant amount of human deaths, and elephant attacks were a major contributor. When we talk about Odisha, between 2024 to 25, 171 human deaths. Okay. Not only this, there will be economic cost also. That means these elephants will also raid the crops of the farmers, and it is said a single raid, one raid of elephant is enough to cause damage worth 1/5 cost or 1/5 income of the farmer. Okay, so 1/5 income of the farmer is also going to go away on just one single raid by an elephant. All right. Wildlife cost. Now wildlife cost, when we talk about conservation projects, there are Project Tiger 1973, we have Project Elephant 1992. Okay, Project Elephant, Asiatic elephant is endangered. Again, tiger is also endangered when we talk about the IUCN status. All right, so these also have a cost. When we are, on one hand, we are talking about conservation, On the other hand, we find that the increasing urbanization or habitat fragmentation, habitat degradation, and human-wildlife conflict leading to retaliatory killings, it is all having a cost on the conservation process as well. The wildlife cost comes at electrocution. You'll find that the elephants, to keep the elephants away from raiding the crops, usually people will utilize electric fences. And when the elephants try to cross this electric fences, they will be electrocuted and they will die in the process. Sometimes the voltage that is given to these electric fences are very, very high. And when it is high, it can lead to their killing as well. Then train collisions, then this is about the linear infrastructure again. That means the trains, they do not know when the elephant is going to cross, and when it happens, it is going to lead to the death of the elephant. Poisoning, retaliatory killings. Okay, some examples of these happenings. You will find that Assam and particularly the northeast part will have a huge density of elephants, okay, and therefore there will be more instances of human-wildlife conflict. That is, you will find Assam train-elephant collisions to be much higher. These are the examples. And Kodagu, crop raiding due to disrupted migration routes. This is in the Western Ghats, and in Western Ghats also this problem is huge. Okay, there is a projection that we might become a global hotspot for human-wildlife conflict by 2070. Okay, so this is also something that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about the conservation measures. Okay, now governance and technological responses. Now to achieve certain kind of reduction in the deaths of the elephants, as well as reduce the amount of loss that is faced by humans on the ecological side, on the economic cost, as well as on the life cost. So policy measures, first we already have Project Elephant, and under this Project Elephant we also have wildlife corridors. This has right to passage. Okay, understand this when we talk about elephants, and particularly in the context of elephants, Project Elephant, we talk about right to passage. Right to passage is something that is related to the understanding that these elephants are the ones, they are mega grazers. That means they will eat a lot of the vegetation in a single day. Okay, it is said that close to 150 kgs of vegetation is needed for their own survival within the day, and close to 150 liters of water is also needed. Okay, so such huge amount of resources are required, and therefore it is not very, it is not sufficient for one habitat to support them, and therefore they will keep on moving. Okay, they are also social animals. They are led by a female elephant. Okay, so they will move from one habitat to the other and then to the other, and when the habitat one recovers, they will come back to it. Okay, so this is usually that is the migration of elephants. Okay, in this case we go for wildlife corridors. That means we connect one habitat to the other and so on. So this will help the elephants to survive longer, and it will not let them isolate with respect to their genes as well. Compensation mechanisms. The compensation mechanisms are also there. Compensation mechanisms particularly point to the people who are a part of this human-wildlife conflict, and they have lost their livelihood income, they have lost lives, they have lost certain properties. Okay, so any kind of compensation is given so that they do not get involved and go for retaliatory killings of these animals. Now, technology interventions, AI-based early warning system. AI-based early warning system, that means artificial intelligence. That means that the elephants, whenever they are moving into a particular zone, it is going to warn you at the earliest stage itself, so that the necessary precautions can be taken. Thermal drones. Thermal drones would be the ones that would be watching the elephants from the distance, and they would also be detecting a huge source of huge infrared radiation that would be derived from the heat from the body of the elephant, and they would also track the movement. Okay, tracking the movement is necessary because it will help to prevent any kind of conflict. Then you have satellite monitoring and GPS tracking. Okay, so one case study is there, Udanti Sita Nadi Tiger Reserve. Okay, so you will have the local population. The local population also, they sit as fire watchers, water watchers, thermal drones to reduce conflict significantly. It has been seen that when people get involved, when we talk about human-wildlife conflict, when people get involved and they sit as forest watchers, that means fire watchers, if there has been any kind of forest fires, they alert the forest department. Okay, when there has been drying up of water holes, these are the ones that come and inform the forest department. Okay, these are necessary and they are also going to help when we talk about the human wildlife conflict, and they have helped to reduce the conflict significantly in this tiger reserve. Okay. Coming to the next issue, barn swallow. Okay, now this is again from biodiversity and its conservation. Okay, so what has the issue been? Wildlife Institute of India. Wildlife Institute of India has found that barn swallow has become a year-round breeding resident in Manipur's Imphal Valley instead of remaining only a seasonal migrant. Okay, so the news is about barn swallow. What happened is that it was an earlier a migratory bird, but now it has started to permanently reside in the Manipur's Imphal Valley. Okay, so this drives curiosity that why it has chosen to make this resident a permanent resident for its own. Okay, so the shift from being migratory, okay, this was a characteristic that means they were supposed to move from point A to point B to point C and D, and all the ecological niches would be serving different types of purposes for them. Okay, that is, they are going to carry out various kinds of activities in different ecological niche. But now all of that has been condensed and they have started living permanently in the Manipur's Imphal Valley, right? So why is this shift from migratory to resident behavior? It indicates first climate driven behavioral adaptation, land use changes, and ecological suitability in human modified landscapes. Okay, so first is about the climate change. That means they find the climate to be conducive for their ecological activities. Second, human land use changes. That means there is more amount of crops that are there and that is going to help them survive for a longer time. And third is ecological suitability. When we talk about human modified landscapes, that means they are now adapting to live along with or alongside the human environments. Okay, now the basics related to barn swallow. Sometimes they will ask you. So small migratory, it is small, and migratory songbird. Physical features, you can see here. Physical features. First, iridescent blue-black upper body. Blue-black upper body. The thing is, iridescent means that in different types of lightings, they will appear to be of different colors. Long, deeply fogged tail. This you can see. And then chestnut throat and cinnamon underparts. So these are basically describing cinnamon underparts. They are basically describing what kind of colors do they exhibit. Okay, I would suggest that you keep this picture in mind. All right. Behavior. Coming to the behavior part, they are diurnal and insectivorous. What does diurnal mean? Diurnal means that they are active during the day, as opposed to being nocturnal. Nocturnal means that they are active during the night. Insectivorous means that they eat a range of insects. Then catches insects during the flight. Okay, so they have this kind of a behavioral feature in which they are going to trap the insects in the mid-air only. It is not like they will sit down and then they will trap the insect. They would do it mid-flight. Third, builds cup-shaped mud nests. Okay, so mud nests are built. Usually the twigs of the branches of the trees, they are used, but here you will find that this behavioral feature of barn swallow, they will be using cup-shaped mud nests. Usually raises 2 broods. Okay, for us conservation status, it is usually found in abundance and therefore it is IUCN status is least concern, and Wildlife Protection Act, under this it is under Schedule 2. This means lesser degree of protection as compared to the Schedule 1 animals. Okay, so why has it become a resident in Manipur? Okay, this is the question. So first is drivers of behavioral change. Climate change, milder winters, they reduce the need for long distance migration. The thing is that when they travel from long distances and particularly in colder regions. Now since the climate change has led to global warming and increase in temperature, there has been rise in temperature. So therefore the colder climate is not as cold as it used to be. Okay, so there is no point in traveling such large distances. So first behavioral change driver is climate change. Second, Favorable ecological conditions. Abundance of flying insects. Remember, we talked about them as being insectivorous, and they are also going to catch and trap the insects mid-flight. Okay, so here they will find in Mizoram Imphal Valley, they will find that there is abundance of food, that is flying insects. Then stable breeding environment. Suitable nesting structures are also built in these kind of landscapes. This is something that is going to help one with their food niche, habitat niche, as well as reproductive niche. All of these niches are something that is already found here, and that is why they will convert. They will not go to different places when they are getting everything in one place. All right. So next reason is synanthropic adaptability. Okay, they benefit from human settlement. Okay, there is human settlements there, and these are not, not invasive of the structures that these birds would need. They are in fact much more cooperative. They are much more useful. Buildings, bridges, roofs, human structures, these are useful for nesting. That means the reproductive niche is also something that they find useful in this Imphal Valley. Okay, next important. There is concept of ethno-ornithology. That means it studies the relationship. Here it is important. Ethno means cultural, ornithology means the study of birds. So humans, cultures and birds. So traditional beliefs aiding conservation. Okay, one of the important measures under the Wildlife Protection Act is also that of sacred groves, that talks about the community reserves. Okay, community reserves are also a type of protected areas, and in this what happens is that there is tradition that meets conservation. Okay, that means it is because of the traditional beliefs we are able to see that there is conservation of plants and animals by the local community. Okay, what is ecological importance? The thing is that they eat insects and they are insectivorous, so they are naturally going to control the pests. So we are talking about flies, beetles, wasps and insects. Also, they help in maintaining the agricultural ecosystem balance, and wetland ecological stability is also being maintained by them. Socio-cultural importance. Now, it is important for the Maiti culture. Okay, in Maiti culture, they are regarded as associated with goddess Lakshmi. Okay, they are the symbols of prosperity, and therefore they are not hunted down, and therefore it is an example, a great example of human wildlife coexistence. Okay, so now moving to the next part, next topic. This is again from the biodiversity and its conservation. This talks about pangolins. So this is conservation mapping of pangolin trafficking. Okay, trafficking basically means that there is illegal movement due to the humans, whether it is of parts of the animals or whether it is the whole animal, from one part to the other. Okay, this is illegal trade, kind of an illegal trade for the personal benefits of the people. All right, so trafficking is there. And with respect to pangolin, pangolins are also known as anteaters. Anteaters. Okay, so this is a kind of a pangolin. It is curled up. Okay, it is curled up, and you will see that these are the kind of shells that it will have. Okay, these shells are particularly important. This is the reason, this is one of the reasons why this illegal trafficking takes place. That means because they are used as, these shells are used as traditional medicines. Okay, so what has happened? A study has been published in PLOS Biology, developed by DNA based genetic map to trace the origin and trafficking routes of illegally traded pangolins. Okay, so the thing is that because of these kind of structures, body parts, it is also something that has been traded, illegally trafficked from one point to the other, and now we are able to track their origin as well as trafficking routes whenever they are illegally traded. Okay, so this is because of the genomic mapping that has been done. All right, so genomic mapping tool, it identifies the poaching hotspots, traces smuggling corridors, and links seized pangolin scales to source population. Okay, so thing is, for example, pangolins, suppose this is the whole ecosystem. Pangolins are found here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so they are found here. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so what will genomic mapping do? They will collect the DNA samples from each of these 5 populations. Okay, that is the genomic mapping. So this means I will collect DNA samples from all of these 5 regions, and you will see that DNA of the pangolins that are in these particular regions, they would be much closer to each other. For example, there are two pangolins in region 1, 2, or 4, or 5, any region. You'll find that the pangolins which are in close proximity within the region, they would be having similar kind of DNA. And therefore, it will be able to differentiate between the 5 different regions based pangolins. Now, suppose you find a pangolin that has been illegally traded or trafficked. Okay, if it is illegally trafficked, you will find that, suppose say it is A, the name of that pangolin is A. This DNA of A is going to match to either one of them. Okay, the closest that this DNA matches to, suppose it matches with 3. So you will know that where this population has been trafficked from. That means where the origin of that individual pangolin is. Okay, and on the way you will also be able to find what are the trafficking routes. Means the similarity between the DNA of this 3 and 2, it might lead to an understanding that this genomic pattern is sourced from which all routes. All right, so this is about the genomic mapping. All right. Now, pangolins, let us understand the basics and the conservation. Basics and conservation. So first, about pangolins, they are the only mammals. First, understand that they are mammals. Okay, when we talk about the animal kingdom, they can be birds, there can be fishes, amphibians, reptiles, mammals. So pangolins are mammals. They are covered with keratin scales. Keratin scales that we have seen in the earlier picture. They are commonly called scaly anteaters. Scaly because of the structure of kind of shells that they have, and anteaters because they eat ants, right? Nocturnal and insectivorous. Nocturnal means that they are very, very shy animals. Okay, they try to avoid the human populations. Okay, although the human population in some areas, it is known that they fear these anteaters, however they are shy. Okay, so they are not going to harm the humans. And they are insectivorous. That means they clear off the habitat with respect to the various kinds of insects. Species, how many species are there? 8 species are there worldwide, 4 Asian and 4 African. So Indian pangolin is there, and Chinese pangolin is there. These 2 species are found in India. What is the conservation status? Under CITES, it is Appendix 1. Okay, particularly because we talk about the trafficking part, CITES is a convention which talks about the trafficking in endangered species. In this, it is placed in Appendix 1. That means it has the highest degree of protection, as well as in WPA 1972, Indian pangolin is in Schedule 1. Okay, why is it trafficked? So we have covered this. The scales are used in traditional medicine, and also, okay, apart from the shells, the meat is consumed as, something that is people prefer it for the taste. So consider delicacy in legal markets. Okay, and one more important thing is that the pangolins are regarded as the world's most trafficked mammals. Okay, and that is the reason that they are placed in CITES Appendix 1. Okay. Now, so we have seen how the regions, how the mapping is done, okay, and how the origin of the pangolin is being traced. So scientific mechanism, researchers have analyzed 671 genomic markers and DNA variations across pangolin population. That means each and every variation, that means what is the appearance, whether it looks a certain way, it has a certain color, okay, it has a certain height, it has a certain structure, it has certain width, certain number of shells, okay, all of these things that are the variations that are found in certain regions, it has been analyzed, it has been mapped, okay. This is one of the most advanced features when we talk about tracing the trafficking routes as well as tracing the origin of the trafficked animal. All right, uses what? Museum specimens and fresh biological samples. Okay, museum specimens would be the old ones. That means whether the DNA of that pangolin was traditionally or in the old sense was found. That means old generations of pangolins survived there, and this is one of the animal pangolins that is close to its ancestry. Second, the fresh biological specimens from that region as well. Okay, so it is compared to both of them so that there is a maximum DNA overlap and therefore the origin can be traced properly, accurately. Created geo-referenced genetic database. That means along with the location, this genetic database also points to the location where this pangolin will have the maximum overlap of DNA. This DNA map, this will identify geographic origin, detect trafficking routes, and connect seizures to poaching zones. Okay. Now, trafficking networks and conservation significance. So, why is it of significance to us? Trafficking corridors have been identified. Okay, it has been Northeast India, Arunachal Pradesh, Assam routes, and Yunnan, that is a province in China. These kind of linkages have been seen. Okay, usually it was seen that it will not have international repercussions, but then it has been seen that there might be a linkage between the international gangs of people who are promoting this kind of a trafficking, okay, for illegal markets. Now, why it is important? One, conservation. Okay, it helps us to target poaching hotspots. Once we know which area, which origin of pangolins, where the detection or where the surveillance is weaker, and because of that the poaching is able to take place, then we can have higher or tighter amount of surveillance measures. Second, supports evidence-based enforcement. Okay, it is not randomly to call a country and say that you have to particularly go for greater surveillance measures in this region. There is an evidence that will be supported due to the DNA mapping. Second, governance. It strengthens the international wildlife crime investigation. Yes, wildlife crime with respect to the trafficking part, at least that will be considerably reduced. And moreover, if this is something that is going to be successful, then it is also going to be replicated in other animals as well. Improves transboundary cooperation. Transboundary means that when you cross the political boundaries, the problems are also faced on the other side of the border. So this means that this trafficking, this trafficking can benefit. This trafficking can be prevented with the transboundary cooperation, which means that different countries like India and China, they can collaborate and utilize this DNA mapping so that they can collectively or collaboratively, they can conserve these pangolin species. Scientific demonstrates the role of genomics in conservation biology. Conservation biology is simply about conserving the number of individuals in the population of a particular species. So conservation biology, definitely it benefits from the genomics. All right. Now next is canine distemper virus threats to animals. This is again from the topic of biodiversity and its conservation. So canine distemper. So there has been deaths of tiger and her cubs. This has already been in news. Kanha Tiger Reserve, and it has triggered concerns about the canine distemper virus. Okay, canine distemper virus among the wild carnivores. So CDV. Okay, CDV is an emerging major wildlife disease threat because it spreads from domestic stray dogs to wildlife. Okay, that means the carriers of this disease or carriers of this virus would be the stray dogs. Okay, they would be the ones that would carry them, and it will spread to various kinds of carnivores. Okay, it affects range of animals like lions, tigers, leopards, and so on. Okay, particularly when we are talking about the big cat species, this is of utmost concern. Okay, it affects respiratory and nervous systems, and it can wipe out vulnerable carnivore populations. Okay, so it is like a spillover disease. That means it gets transferred and it affects a wide range of animals, and therefore this is of concern with respect to the conservation processes. So about CDV, okay, it is highly contagious. That means it jumps from one organism to the other, and it is a viral disease. Viral disease, that means it will multiply within the host, caused by single-stranded RNA virus. Okay, the family of which is Paramyxoviridae, genus Morbillivirus. Morbillivirus. Okay, so it is closely related to, it is similar to measles and rinderpest. Okay, it affects range of animals. Range of animals we have seen. It can be dogs, foxes, wolves, leopards, lions, tigers. What about humans? Humans are, however, not affected by this CDV. All right. So humans are not affected. So transmission, how does the transmission takes place? So it can be through direct contact. It could be through fluid contact also. That means saliva or nasal secretions, contaminated material, aerosols. Aerosols are the particles that are suspended in air. Okay, so suppose there is an animal that sneezes, and therefore it will release a huge number of droplets, and that can also infect the species around it. Primary reservoir, domestic and stray dogs. That means from this it will jump to the other carnivores. Okay, so now symptoms and ecological significance. So first is, what kind of diseases, what kind of symptoms can you observe when you find that an animal is affected with the canine distemper virus? First is respiratory problems, pneumonia, coughing, breathing distress. That means they have a difficulty in breathing. You will find them to be panting. Okay, gastrointestinal, you'll find vomiting and diarrhea. Neurological, seizures, paralysis, abnormal behavior. You'll find that the tigers who are infected with CDV, they will become fearless, and when they become fearless, they will also go on to raid, or they will also go on to be in the human settlements wherein they have no amount of fear, right? So this will also, the CDV will ultimately translate itself into human wildlife conflict. Ecological concern, it can reduce apex predator populations, weaken food chain stability because of the elimination of the apex predators. When we talk about apex predator, it is the one that is at the top of the food chain, and that is important to consider when we talk about the pyramid of numbers. It is important that the apex predator is there so that the control of population is maintained. Trigger local extinction risks. Now there has been examples with respect to Gir lions in 2018. They were also affected by CDV that led to a huge number of lion deaths also. Serengeti lion declines. This was in Tanzania. Okay, and now we have the Kana tiger deaths. Okay. Now the governance response and One Health approach. Okay, this is important. Governance and One Health approach. So the current measures that are being taken is first vaccination of the stray dogs around reserves. Okay, that means the protected area networks, the reserves, wildlife reserves are there, biosphere reserves are there. Okay, we will try to vaccinate the stray dogs that are the primary carrier of the CDV so that they do not go on to infect the other carnivores. Okay. Second, buffer zone disease surveillance. That means even when this is the protected area, we will have a buffer zone around it, and here we will go for active detection of any kind of CDV transmission that is taking place, or any kind of animal which is carrying this CDV. Wildlife monitoring protocols and NDCA advisories are issued. Okay, that means National Tiger Conservation Authority, that was constituted under the Wildlife Protection Act in 2006, that has also taken cognizance, and therefore it has also resulted in giving out advisories for the conservation of tigers. Important examples: Tadoba Andheri Tiger Reserve. Okay, 2000 plus stray dogs were vaccinated. So this is one of the best practice. Okay, sterilization drives were also launched. Now, One Health concept. What does it talk about? So it says that it is not just in isolation. When we talk about the public health, it is not to be considered in isolation. That means humans are not isolated. They are connected to their environment, and therefore there are a range of diseases that can affect the humans, and they can be transmitted from the animals. So it has to recognize the linkage between human health, animal health, and ecosystem health. Okay, And CDV demonstrates that diseases in domestic animals can threaten wildlife conservation. That means on one side we are talking about increasing the number of individuals of a particular species, but on the other hand there is a disease that is going to go for decline in the number of individuals. This is antithetical to the conservation process we are aiming for. Now, India's abstention on United Nations General Assembly Climate Resolution. Now, this is related to the topic of climate change. Climate change. Okay. So, India has abstained from voting on UNGA climate resolution endorsing ICJ International Court of Justice advisory opinion on climate obligation of states. Okay, so what has happened is there has been ICJ has said, okay, International Court of Justice has said that everyone or every state, every country, because there has been a rising climate change problem, and therefore every country should contribute to it, and every country should be legally bound, and should they not do it, there might be certain types of violations, certain types of penalties that might be issued. All right. So issue in brief. The resolution calls upon countries to comply with international legal obligations related to climate change. India has abstained, however. India has abstained for the reasons: first, the resolution weakened the UNFCCC framework. When we talk about UNFCCC, okay, recently COP30 was conducted, okay, that was in Brazil, Belém package was there. UNFCCC is all about United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Okay? It is a kind of a negotiation platform in which the countries, there's a debate broadly, if we talk about broadly, between the two categories, the developed states and the developing states. Okay, developed countries are there. They have accepted that there has been historical emissions, and due to that the climate change is taking place, and therefore they have certain types of responsibilities towards the developing countries, because the developing countries have a long way to go with respect to their development trajectory. So first is, India said that it weakens what we stand for in the UNFCCC framework. Okay, it is going to only weaken the negotiation ability of this platform. Second, it ignored the climate finance obligations of the developed countries. Okay, in a way, India is also saying that this might lead to the developing states contributing more despite not having polluted earlier historically. Okay, so it goes against or violates the polluter pays principle. Third, risked imposing additional burdens on developing nations. Okay, that means we already have our nationally determined contributions, and we are moving ahead with it with great success. Okay, and this kind of a move might just add to our own burden. All right. Okay, now this UNGA resolution and ICJ climate opinion. All right. So let us see. It was adopted by 141 votes were in favor, 8 were against, 28 abstentions, and including India. India is part of the developing nations, and it supports the developing nations itself in the side of negotiations. Led by whom? Led by Vanuatu and small island developing states. Actually, the small island developing states are the most vulnerable ones. Okay, and India has been doing whatever it can, and possibly even better, with respect to its nationally determined contributions. Now, what was the ICJ advisory opinion in 2025? It stated that countries have legal obligations to prevent climate harm. Okay, they were trying to make it a legal obligation. Climate inaction may violate international law. This means that if you are not going for preventing harm due to the climate change, then your country might be punished for it. Okay, there might be sanctions, there might be penalties. Okay, but the advisory opinions are non-binding. They carry major legal and moral authority. That means it is usually seen that if you are violating, though it may be non-binding, but still morally it is going to be persuasive. Key concern: many developing countries say that judicial interpretation may bypass the negotiated climate principles. That means there are a range of principles that we have talked about in climate change also, and these principles would be overlooked, and the years of negotiations would be rendered useless if we go for adhering to these legal obligations. Now, why did India abstain? Okay, first, so we have discussed, first was protection of CBDR-RC principle. What is CBDR-RC? common but differentiated responsibility, respective capabilities. Okay, it points to the direction that there has been historically emissions by the developed nations, and therefore they carry more amount of responsibilities towards preventing climate harm. Okay, and therefore there is India, which is a developing nation, which also has its own trajectory to grow with respect to the development stage, and therefore it has to go for emissions and conserve and has to have the welfare of the Indians. Okay, so argued the climate responsibility must remain based upon historical emission and developmental difference. That means developmental trajectory of different nations is different, and it is also based upon the principle of historic emissions. Principle of historic emissions will only say that the polluter, historically the ones who have polluted more than the ones they are emitting now, they should be the ones to pay. Second, climate finance concern. Okay, it did not sufficiently mention the climate finance obligations of developed nations. Okay, it is also raising this issue that ICG legal obligations might be there, but the financial obligations which they have fought for in these negotiations against the developed nations, that means developed nations should pay $100 billion to the developing nations to develop various kinds of renewable energy sources, or reduce the amount of carbon dioxide emissions or carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. They have not been affixed. The third thing, fear of expanded legal liability. So developing countries may face legal obligation or litigation pressure beyond the negotiated commitments. It is like you have already negotiated, you have already said that I would be voluntarily going for my nationally determined contribution. I would be reducing my carbon dioxide emissions by 35% of 2005 levels. Okay, you have already said this, but then this comes as an additional burden. Then protection of policy space. Now we want flexibility. Okay, we want flexibility. The energy transition has to be just transition, because a lot of social welfare depends upon it. A lot of states like Jharkhand, they depend upon the revenue that is derived from the coal production. Okay, there has to be developmental growth and there has to be poverty alleviation. All of this will require that we do not have right now the amount of money that is required to go for sudden transition, sudden change. Okay, so therefore it has to be gradually, and it has to be gradual, and it has to be fair and equitable, so that the social welfare is also something that is ensured in the process of transition. All right. Now coming to the questions, consider the following statements regarding the barn swallow. Okay, so it is an insectivorous bird known for building mud nests. So this is right, insectivorous and bird nest. It has recently shown a shift from migratory to resident behavior in parts of Northeast India. Northeast India, Imphal Valley, we are talking about. Third, it is listed as endangered on IUCN Red List. So this is wrong, because it is present in abundance, it is least concern. Okay, so answer would be A, 1 and 2. Answer is 1 and 2. Question number 2, with reference to canine distemper virus, consider the following statements. It is caused by an RNA virus belonging to the family Paramyxoviridae. This is correct. Second, the disease can spread from domestic dogs to wild carnivores. Yes, this is also correct. Humans are highly vulnerable, humans, to CDV infection. This is wrong, because humans are not affected by this. Okay, answer is A, 1 and 2 only. Okay, coming to the last question, consider the following statements regarding India's abstention on the UNGA climate resolution. So first is, India argued that the resolution weakened the principle of CBDR-RC, that is common but differentiated responsibility, respective capabilities. This is right. The resolution was related to advisory opinion of the ICJ on climate obligations. Yes, this is also right. Third, ICJ advisory opinions are legally binding to all UN member states. This is definitely wrong. So answer again is A, 1 and 2 only. Okay, so this is the end of the current affairs session. Thank you so much.